and easy travels today. It's that time of year, man. What a fun couple of weeks that are coming up.
Yeah, I'm glad, Richard, glad to be with you. And, of course, I was glad to make it Omaha. Didn't have any trouble getting here, which is always nice. And, yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man. We got a good field, some interesting teams. A lot of the powerhouses made it here, and some of the teams we thought would make it here. Wasn't a ton of upsets, although it was a few, obviously. But it's going to be a good World Series. There's a lot of talent here and a lot of good fan bases here.
Let's start with, Ben, with the team that you're more familiar with any other. This LSU team that spent the majority of the season as number one and has been a top 10 team the entire year. It really is hard to believe that they have not been to Omaha since 2017. I feel like everybody associates LSU with the College World Series. I know fans had gotten antsy. That's the reason that Jay Johnson was brought in. Is LSU built to win this entire tournament with the way that it's set up?
I think so. I mean, look, we all watched Ole Miss, last year. And when you talk about built to win, to me, it falls on teams that are playing well and the hottest teams, and we saw Ole Miss do that last year, But with the off-days and the way this thing is set up, everybody knows Paul Skeens is the best pitcher in the country, And honestly, there's some good pitchers out there, but I don't even think it's even close. Like, he's been that dominant this year. And, with the way the off-days are structured, you win your first two balls. You play a day, you get a day off. You play another day, you win next, you get 2 days off. So there's almost a scenario in there, we've seen it before, where your best pitcher, if you make a deep, deep run and make it all the way to the championship series, you get 3 starts at the College World Series, And so, yeah, I mean, look, talk about LSU. They didn't finish the season like they wanted to. They were 7-7 their final 14 games. But look, I think Jay Johnson rallied the troops, and the Tigers look really good in their regional. They look really good in their super regional. So they seem to be playing like that team that, as you mentioned, was ranked number one for 11 consecutive weeks to begin the season. So I think LSU has as good a chance as anybody, but there's some really good teams here.
Ben, you've been at Outbox Stadium for a lot of big moments. Neither of the games against Kentucky were super competitive. I mean, lopsided scores. But there were a couple of moments in both of those games that I thought kind of created some of those special moments in that ballpark. Just the late start and the way LSU hit the ball on Saturday night. And then Sunday night for Dylan Cruz to get that 2-run double in his last at-bat in Baton Rouge. And those looked like they were kind of hair on the back of your neck stand-up moments.
No doubt. I mean, that's probably the loudest, or as loud I could definitely say, as I've ever heard the boxes when Cruz came up. Of course, LSU was up big, but it was a big moment where you kind of put the final nail in the coffin kind of deal, and his final at bat after 3 All-American seasons, And look, Dylan Cruz, and this is a mouthful, but Dylan Cruz will arguably go down, and I think he is the greatest position player to ever play at LSU, and that is a mouthful. But for him to finish off his career like he did was pretty special. It kind of reminded me of Jake Bangham in the Super Regional and Big Hit Mac in the Super Regional over at State a few years ago, and the way they went off the field there in their final at bats. And so it's really cool for Dylan Cruz. And I know Tiger fans are excited about getting back on Omaha. I'm with you on that. First time since 17 they've been back here, So I think this is a bunch that's driven, a team that expected to be there when the season began, expected to win the College World Series. They'll get that opportunity now.
I got to ask you about Quinn Matthews from Stanford. I know you've seen the stories. He throws 156 pitches in that game. And Ben McDonald in college at LSU would have just kind of been like, yeah, okay, that's what you got to do. But the game is in a different place than it was in the late 80s. What do you make of a guy going out and throwing that many pitches in a game? Are you okay with it?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, it didn't bother me that much because – if the recovery is going to be there for him, and look, that's where we are with our college pitchers now, our aces. I mean, they're throwing every 7 days. And I don't want to go out and throw 156 pitches every weekend. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is when you get to the playoffs and you get to the postseason play, we see our major league pitchers do this, right? We see them do things they don't typically do. In other words, we'll see a pitcher come back on short rest. We've seen starters who get 2 starts in the World Series and they come back in relief 2 days later, And so you do things a little bit differently when you get to the postseason. I would never want to see the kid throw 156, in back-to-back starts, or maybe throw 156 and come back in relief the next day or two, kind of like we used to do. I wouldn't want that for anybody. But if he gets a full 6 or 7 days off before he pitches here in the College World Series, I'm okay with that because there's a big difference in throwing 156 when you're struggling and you're getting hit all over the field and you're walking guys versus 156 where you're cruising along pretty good. And look, I watched a lot of that game. He cruised along with a lot of
16 strikeouts.
Yeah, it wasn't. And that's what I was kind of watching his stuff. His stuff didn't. The velo stayed the same. The stuff was stayed really good. And so yeah, he's the ace of the Stanford staff. Now, I don't expect him to go in game one because of the short rest. They hadn't named the starter yet, but I'm sure he'll go in game two for sure. So I'm okay with it. People made a lot of Paul Skeens too. Paul Skeens threw 120, I think 4 pitches against Tulane in a regional. People jumped up and down and screamed and hollered. And I was like, wait a minute. They gave him an extra day. He pitched on his 8th day coming from the SEC tournament, and they cut him back in the start before that, so in case they wanted to use him like this, they could. And so I'm okay with that. Recovery is the most important thing, and if you're going to up your pitch count by a few, you got to have the recovery days in there and nothing in between. And those guys, I'm sure, will both get that.
Ben, what's your schedule? Are we going to see you on the early games or the late games?
I am right now on the early games, and that is subject to change. It always seems to change like that. But as of right now, I have TCU and Oral Roberts kicking this thing off on Friday at 1 o'clock, and then I'll have the day game Wake Forest and Stanford, which I'm looking forward to seeing Wake Forest. I've heard a lot about them. They look very talented on paper, but I'm looking forward to that.
Well, and based on what they've done, so lowest ERA in the country, hitting over 300 as a team, over 100 bombs this year, hitting for average, all of that good stuff. Are they the most complete team in the field?
It's hard to argue that they're not. Right? When the numbers you just mentioned, look, when you're first in ERA in the country, first in WHIP, you're fourth in homers, you're a good fielding team. They're 14th in fielding in the country, and they're third in runs per game. And so when you combine all those things, it's hard to say they're not the most complete team. Now we got the boppers here, right? I think 5 of the top 10 teams in top 10 in home runs are here in Omaha this year. You're talking about Tennessee and, of course, Florida, LSU. Wake can bang it. Oral Roberts can bang it too. But this Wake Forest team, man, I tell you what, it seems to be very, very complete team. And people say, well, listen, they play in the bandbox, and that's why the offensive numbers are where they're at. I'll say, okay, well, maybe so, but that even makes the pitching staff that much more impressive that it can play in a very offensive ballpark for over half their games and yet lead the nation in ERA. So it goes to say something. It says something about their pitching and certainly about their defense too.
All right, Ben, I'm going to put you in a different spot. I'm not as a pitcher, not as a broadcaster, but I'm going to make you a general manager. And you have the first pick in the draft in a month. And you are choosing between Paul Skeens, Dylan Cruz, and Wyatt Langford. Who are you taking number one?
Are we taking out the idea of cutting the deal? Saying, okay, if I take this guy, I can save money, I'll roll that money. Are we just talking about what I would do, everything being equal?
You have 3 guys that you think can change the future of your franchise, and you're going to be able to get them signed and get it done. Which one are you taking?
Well, to make it simple, if I need a pitcher, obviously you know who you take, right? If I think that's where I got to go. I'm drafting for my club right now and saying, what is my biggest need for my club right now? And that's what I would probably do. To answer your question in a long way, I like Dylan Cruz more than Langford, although I think Langford might have a bigger upside. But Dylan Cruz has done it every year since he's been 13 years old. Remember, Wyatt Langford couldn't even get on the field his freshman year at Florida. So I've got a better, track record with Cruz. I'll tell you this. Paul Skeens is the best pitcher prospect we've seen in baseball since Steven Strasburg came along. He's that good. And so, But here's the problem. If I'm a GM, I know that position players have outperformed pitchers at the top of the draft in the history of the draft. And so it makes you want to lean a little bit more towards a position player. But if the Pirates if the slot value is $9 million and the Pirates go to Wyatt Langford and say, Wyatt, we'll pay you $7 million, but that's all we're going to pay you. We're going to take you number 1. We're going to save $2 million. We're going to roll it over into a high school kid, maybe in rounds 2 or 3. They may end up with Wyatt Langford. But if talent being talent, what it is, what's going to happen is Cruz goes first, Skeens goes second, Langford goes third in the Tigers.
All right. Well, we'll certainly keep an eye on that. How quickly does Skeens get to the big leagues?
You can put him there tomorrow. If you wanted to, and I've said this, if you wanted to, you could plug him in to a bullpen right now tomorrow in Major League Baseball, and he'd hold his own. It's the fastball is elite. For your viewers out there, his fastball averages 98.5 miles an hour. I went and looked the other day on Pitch Savant. There's one Major League starting pitcher that is averaging 98.5 or better, and that's Green over with the Cincinnati Reds. Paul Skeens would be the only one doing that in the big leagues right now if he was in the big leagues. That's how elite the fastball is and the slider. It's a special kind of talent that doesn't come along very often.
So if Pittsburgh takes him number one, it would not surprise you to see him in Pittsburgh next year.
No, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I think they rest him this year. Now, the decision they make is this right there. They're right there in first place, or I think they are in first place in their division right now. Do they need some help down the stretch? Could they use another arm down the stretch this year to get into the playoffs? That's interesting for me. I don't think they do that because, he's going to go over 100 innings this year, and I can't see that scenario where they take a chance on doing that. I think they probably want to rest him. But if they did take him number one, or whoever does take Paul Skeens, I would not be shocked to see him in a big league uniform next year at all. Because we've got two guys right now in the big leagues that came from our 22 draft last year. The shortstop, right. Zach Neto over at Campbell, starting for the Angels at shortstop right now, and the hard thrower Ben Joyce, who was at Tennessee last year. He's in the big leagues right now as well.
Ben, you're the best. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon.